The first time I realized someone might be trying to slowly erase me, I was sitting on my own couch pretending to be asleep, not resting, pretending. And the only reason I knew someone had come inside the house was because the old floorboard near the hallway gave that familiar creak, the same quiet complaint it has made for 20 years whenever someone steps on it with real weight. I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't even change my breathing. Because 45 minutes earlier, when I had poured my morning coffee straight down the kitchen sink, that was the test. For 3 weeks, something strange had been happening to me, and I needed to know if it was my age or something else. My daughter-in-law, Celine, brought me coffee every morning like clockwork. Same mug, same careful smile, same gentle voice. "Drink it while it's hot, Mama." She always said it sweetly, the way people talk to someone they've already decided is fragile. And that morning, I lifted the mug to my lips just like I always did. But I never swallowed. Instead, I stood up slowly and carried the cup to the sink as if I needed to rinse something. Celine turned away at that exact moment, answering a phone call in the hallway with her back to the kitchen. That was all the time I needed. I tipped the mug forward. The coffee slid quietly down the drain. Dark, silent, gone. I rinsed the cup, filled it with plain hot water so steam would still rise, and then walked back to the couch like nothing had happened. Then I waited, because for the last 3 weeks my mornings had followed a pattern so precise it had begun to scare me. Coffee, 30 minutes, then exhaustion. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long day, something heavier, something unnatural. It felt like someone drawing a curtain across my mind. My arms would grow warm, my thoughts would blur. The television voices would stretch and echo until the room felt far away. Then I would fall asleep. Not a small nap, hours. When I woke up, my mouth would be dry and my head felt wrong, like someone had walked through my memories while I was gone and nudged a few things out of place. Sometimes I forgot conversations. Sometimes I couldn't remember where I had put things that were right in front of me. And every single time Celine reacted exactly the same way. A small laugh, a sympathetic tilt of the head. Memory gets tricky at your age. Mama. At first I believed her. After all, people do get older. Bodies change. Minds slow down. But I raised my son alone after my husband died. I survived grief, lawsuits, and years when sleep was something I earned only after the world stopped asking things of me. I know what my body feels like, and this wasn't normal. So that morning, I decided to find out the truth. I poured the coffee away. Then I leaned back on the couch and let my head fall to the side as if sleep had taken me again. My eyes closed, my breathing slowed, my hands rested loosely in my lap. But inside, my mind was wide awake. If you're watching this right now, tell me what time it is where you are. I always wonder who else is awake during moments like this. Those strange, quiet minutes when something in your life starts to feel wrong. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. 20 minutes. Still nothing. 30 minutes. No heaviness, no fog, no curtain pulling my thoughts away, which meant the exhaustion had never been natural, so I stayed exactly where I was, because if the coffee had been doing something to me, then someone would eventually come to check. And that's when I heard it, the front door unlocking. Not a knock, not hesitation, just the quiet click of someone entering a house they already felt comfortable inside. Footsteps crossed the hardwood floor slowly. It's not the careful steps of someone trying not to wake a sleeping person. Confident steps, the steps of someone who believed the person on the couch was already gone. They stopped right in front of me. Even with my eyes closed, I felt the air change, a presence standing over me. Then Celine's voice whispered softly above my head. Finally. There was a pause, a long one. And then she said something that made the blood drain out of my body. "Oh, I can't keep increasing the dosage forever." The front door opened with the kind of ease that told me this wasn't a surprise visit. No hesitant knock. No pause on the threshold. Just a smooth swing inward, like the house had been rehearsing this moment all morning. I stayed slumped on the couch with my chin tucked, arms heavy in my lap, breathing slow and dull the way Selene expected. But my senses were sharp enough to cut glass. Air moved across my ankles, and the scent of outside drifted in, cold, faintly metallic like rain on pavement. Selena's heels clicked once, twice, then stopped near the entry as if she was making sure I looked convincingly gone. She didn't come back to check my pulse. She didn't touch my shoulder. She didn't whisper my name. She just stepped aside. A man's shoes crossed my hardwood, not sneakers, not boots, hard soles that struck the floor with quiet confidence. Oh, I let my eyelids hang in that half-closed space where the world looks soft but the truth looks sharp. He was tall enough that his shadow reached the edge of the rug and crept up the couch like a slow hand. Selene's voice changed the way it always did when she wanted to sound harmless. "You're sure nobody saw you?" she murmured. He answered low, calm. "Nobody's watching, not if she's out like you said." My stomach tightened at the way he said she, like I was an object in the room instead of the woman who built the life they were standing on. Selene moved closer to him, close enough that their knees nearly touched. Comfortable. Too comfortable. She wasn't acting like a wife worried about her husband being away. She was acting like a woman with freedom. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out cash, folded tight, already counted. She pressed it into his palm like it was routine, like they'd done it before. He closed his fingers around it without looking. That alone made my throat burn, because it wasn't just the money, it was the rhythm. Give, receive. No gratitude, no surprise. The kind of exchange that belongs to people in a plan. He stepped in and hugged her. Not a quick, polite hug, a full-body press that lasted long enough to mean something. And when he pulled back, he touched her cheek with 2 fingers like he had the right. And then he leaned in and kissed her, just a quick peck at the corner of her mouth, not even trying to hide it. Heat rushed up my neck so fast I thought it might give me away. My first thought wasn't poison or paperwork, it was betrayal. It was my son's face, the way Darnell looks when he's proud of something, proud of his wife, proud of his choices, and how stupid I would feel if he came home and found out his own mother saw it first and said nothing. Selene didn't flinch from the kiss. She smiled, and I hated myself for the flash of grief that rose up because for one small second I wanted it to be simple. I wanted it to be an affair. I wanted it to be heartbreak, not something darker. The man's gaze slid toward the couch, not fear, not curiosity, calculation. He looked at me like a mechanic looks at a car that's finally stalled. "She's really out?" he asked. Selene nodded. "Right on time." Then she took a step toward the kitchen, waving him in deeper like he belonged here, and then I felt the humiliation settle lower in my belly, heavy and quiet. He followed her past the edge of my vision, and I heard them stop near the counter where voices carry different. Selene opened a drawer, soft scrape, and then another. "Here," she said. Something small tapped against glass. My mind ran through stupid possibilities, lip gloss, vitamins, some secret perfume, until I heard the unmistakable sound of a bottle turning in a hand, the faint rattle of something inside. My blood went colder. The man exhaled like he'd been holding impatience. "That's what you've been using?" he asked, and there was judgment in it, the way people talk when they think they're smarter than you. Selena's reply came tight. "It worked, didn't it?" He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "It worked because you got lucky. Older bodies react different. You can't be sloppy." Selene's voice dropped. "I'm not sloppy." He didn't answer that directly. He moved closer, and then I heard fabric brush fabric. "Has she been sleeping longer?" he asked, gentle now, like the question mattered more than my life did. Celine hesitated just long enough to tell me she'd been watching my naps like numbers on a report. Yes, she said. Longer. The last few days, she's been out for hours. There was a pause, and in that pause, I felt my heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted to run out of my chest and down the hall. The man's voice lowered even further. I satisfied in a way that made my skin prickle. Good, he said. The amount is working. The word sat in the air like smoke after a firecracker. Small, sharp, impossible to ignore. Amount. Working. For a second, my mind tried to grab the simpler explanation, the easier story, the one people can survive, an affair. Celine sneaking around while my son, Darnell, was out of town. That kind of betrayal is ugly, yes, but it's familiar. I've lived long enough to know what broken marriages look like. I've seen men choose convenience over loyalty. I've watched women smile while their eyes stayed cold. I could have handled that. I could have confronted it. I could have told my son and let the pieces fall where they may. But the way that man said the word amount, like he was measuring something inside my body, twisted my stomach in a way no cheating scandal ever could. I stayed exactly where I was, head tilted against the couch cushion, breathing slow and heavy the way Celine expected. My eyelashes trembled once. I forced them still, because when someone believes you're unconscious, the only weapon you have left is silence. Celine stepped closer again. I heard the slight shift of fabric as she leaned forward, studying me, not with concern, with evaluation. She wasn't asking herself, is she okay? She was asking something much colder. Is she gone enough? The man moved closer too, his shoes steady against the hardwood floor. Celine lowered her voice into a whisper that didn't belong in a family home. She sleeps almost 3 hours now. The way she said almost told me everything. 3 hours wasn't an accident. It was data. She was tracking results. The man made a quiet, approving sound, like someone reviewing a report. Then increase the dosage slowly, he said. Dosage. That word split the world open. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. Dosage wasn't romance. It wasn't betrayal. It was medicine. And it was calculation. It was deliberate. Celine didn't answer right away. I heard her swallow. I've been increasing, she whispered, just like you said. The man's voice stayed calm, professional, controlled in a way that made my skin crawl. Not too fast, he warned. You don't want her collapsing in a way that draws attention. You want it to look natural. Natural. The word dropped into my chest like a stone in deep water. Celine moved again, and her perfume drifted through the room, sweet, almost suffocating, mixing with the faint scent of the candles I burned in the evenings, like she was trying to disguise something rotten. She's been asking questions, Selena said quietly, little ones, but I can tell she's noticing. Inside my chest, something sharp flickered. I wanted to laugh. Of course I was noticing. I wasn't dead. I wasn't helpless. I was lying 3 feet away, listening to every word. But my body stayed slack on the couch because the moment I revealed myself, the truth would disappear with them. The man spoke again, his tone patient, almost instructional. Then stay ahead of her instincts, he said. Confusion is your friend. Doubt is your friend. Make her question what she felt. He paused. Then he added something that turned my blood colder than the sink water I'd poured my coffee into earlier. Soon it will start affecting her memory. Memory. Celine let out a slow breath, like she had been waiting for permission. Good, she whispered. That single word cut deeper than any insult. Good. Like my mind was a door they planned to lock from the outside. Like my life was something they could slowly dim until nobody noticed the lights going out. My face stayed slack, but inside me, something shifted. Shock. Disbelief. Then something harder. Clarity. This wasn't a messy affair. This wasn't betrayal between husband and wife. And this was a plan, carefully measured, built around my sleep, my silence, my body failing on schedule. The man shifted his weight on the rug. "How is she waking up?" he asked. Selena answered immediately, almost eager. Groggy, slow. Sometimes she forgets what she was saying mid-sentence. She paused. "I've been recording it." Recording. My jaw wanted to clench so badly it hurt, but I forced the muscles still. The man hummed thoughtfully. "Perfect," he said, "perfect." I heard them move slightly toward the hallway, their voices lowering now that they believed the danger in the room was unconscious. Then Celine asked the question that finally confirmed what they were building. If we keep this up, how long until she can't fight it anymore? There was a brief silence. The man seemed to consider the answer carefully. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet and final. "Long enough," he said, eyeing for everyone to believe it was already happening. I didn't sit up the moment they drifted down the hall. I stayed folded over like a woman carved out of tired, because panic makes noise, and noise makes mistakes. When the front door finally shut again, and the house settled back into its normal hush, I waited until the silence felt honest. Only then did I lift my head. My neck ached from holding myself wrong, but the ache was clean, real, not manufactured. And I stared at the cup on the coffee table, the one filled with nothing but hot water, and a bitter laugh threatened to rise in my throat. For weeks I'd been blaming myself for a fog somebody else was pouring into me, and now that I knew it, my mind started doing what it always does when it's cornered. It replayed everything, scene by scene, looking for the first crack. The last month came back in flashes, not soft memories, but sharp little pictures. Celine's hand on the mug, Celine's voice. Celine's eyes watching my mouth like she needed to see the swallow. She'd moved into a rhythm with it, the kind of rhythm you get when you practice something enough to stop feeling guilty. Every morning before the sun had fully warmed the kitchen window, she would appear with the cup already made, already sweetened, already dressed up to look like comfort. "I went ahead and fixed your coffee," she'd say, as if she were doing me a favor I never asked for. If I tried to pour my own, she'd step in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, Mama, sit down, let me." She kept it polite. That's the part that haunted me. Polite cruelty doesn't leave bruises, it leaves doubt. I'd take a few sips, and I'd still be fine enough to think I was fine. Then the tired would come like a curtain falling. Not normal tired, not the kind that comes after work or a long day. This tired arrived on schedule, heavy and unnatural, pressing my eyelids down like fingers. And within 30 minutes, my limbs would feel distant, as if my own arms belonged to somebody else. Sometimes I'd tell myself, I'll just rest my eyes for a minute. Then I'd wake up hours later with the room tilted, my mouth dry, my head buzzing with a dull ache that sat behind my eyes. The worst part was waking up mid-thought, mid-intention. I'd stand up to do something simple, put a dish away, check the mail, call a friend, and then I'd be in the hallway forgetting what I was walking toward. And I'd find myself staring at the pantry like it was new. I'd search for words I've used my whole life and come up holding nothing but embarrassment. Celine would swoop in like she'd been waiting behind a curtain. "Mama," she'd say with that little laugh, "you okay? You look lost." And before I could gather myself, she'd pull out her phone. At first, she pretended it was playful. "Hold on, this is too funny," she'd giggle, filming me as if I were a child doing something cute. Look at you forgetting again." The first time she recorded me, I felt my cheeks burn. I told her not to. She waved a hand like I was being dramatic. "It's not serious. Darnell will laugh. It's just one of those moments." But it wasn't funny. Not when your mind is slipping and somebody is treating it like entertainment. I remember one afternoon, not long ago, standing at the sink with a plate in my hand and suddenly not knowing if the water was hot or cold. I stared at the faucet like it was a puzzle. Celine's voice came from behind me, soft as sugar. "See? she said, and then I heard the tiny click that told me she'd started recording again. You're doing it again. I snapped, Stop filming me. She didn't stop. She tilted her head, sympathetic on purpose. Mama, she said, it's okay. This is what happens. We just have to be honest about it. Honest. That word landed wrong. Not because honesty is bad, but because she was using it like a leash. And if I denied it, I looked defensive. If I agreed, I admitted something was wrong. Either way, she won. Then there were the little comments placed like needles. You already told me that. You don't remember? You asked me the same question yesterday. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult me directly. She just planted the idea that my mind was failing, then stood back and watched me water it. The pattern was so clean once I let myself see it. Coffee, fatigue, sleep, confusion. Orient Celine's phone capturing the aftermath. Not to help, not to protect, to build a story about me. A story that could be shown to the right people at the right time. I stood in my living room now, looking at the quiet furniture like it might testify, and I felt something inside me harden. Those videos weren't jokes, they were documentation, and the realization didn't just scare me, it gave me direction. I crossed the room. E picked up Celine's discarded throw blanket from the armchair where she'd tossed it earlier, and underneath it, half hidden like she'd forgotten it was there, I saw the edge of her phone sitting face down, still warm. My fingers hovered above it. Then the screen lit up with a new notification, and one line of text flashed bright enough to make my stomach drop. A message preview with the words, "Send me the newest clip." I didn't pick up Celine's phone. My hand hovered there, my skin buzzing with the urge to snatch it up, unlock it, scroll until I found every rotten thing she'd been saving about me. But rage makes people sloppy, and sloppiness is a gift to someone building a case. So I let the screen go dark again and backed away like the phone was a trap itself. I returned the blanket the way I found it. Then I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and held my palms under cold water until my heartbeat stopped fighting my ribs. And in the mirror, my eyes looked the same as always, brown, tired, stubborn, but there was something new behind them, a decision. If Celine wanted to turn my life into evidence, then I would become the one collecting it. The first thing I did was stop playing fair. Celine had been handing me coffee like a ritual, so I broke the ritual without letting her see the break. I started waking earlier than her, slipping into the kitchen before her heels clicked, before her syrup voice could float in and take over the day. I found the coffee tin and poured half of it into a sealed bag, tucked it deep in the back of my pantry behind the rice and flour, the way you hide something you may need later. Then I replaced what was left in the tin with a fresh, unopened container I bought myself. Same brand, same look, but mine. I wanted two things, control and comparison. The next morning, when Celine offered to make coffee, I smiled and told her sweetly, not today, baby. I'm in the mood to fix my own. Her face tightened for half a second, quick as a blink, and then she smoothed it out. Of course, Mama, she said, but she didn't move away. She stayed right there in the kitchen doorway, watching my hands, watching the mug, watching my mouth, like she was waiting for her plan to start working. I poured from the tin I'd altered, the one that should have been safe, and I didn't drink it. I took a sip and held it in my mouth just long enough to make her believe, then walked to the sink like I was rinsing the cup and let it slide down the drain. I learned to do that without flinching. I learned to keep my face calm even when my stomach rolled at the thought of what I'd swallowed in the weeks before. Then I did the second thing. I started listening differently. Not like a mother listening for disrespect, but like a woman listening for leaks in a story. Celine talked on the phone constantly, like always stepping into the hallway, always lowering her voice, always turning her body away from me. Before, I ignored it because I didn't want to be the kind of woman who spies. Now I understood. She'd already made me the kind of woman who had to. I put my own phone on record when she paced in the kitchen whispering. I left it face down on the counter near the fruit bowl, screen dark, microphone awake, while I pretended to fuss with mail at the table. Now sometimes I caught nothing but murmurs and the clink of a spoon, but sometimes I caught tone, sharp little slices of impatience she never let me hear directly. "She's up early today," Selena hissed once, as if my waking was an inconvenience. Another time, a breathy laugh. "It's working. She doesn't even notice." Those little pieces weren't proof yet, but they were a map. The third thing was the hardest. I began pretending. I hated it. Every part of me hated it. But I needed Celine to believe she was winning, so I started dropping small mistakes like crumbs. I asked the same question twice in 1 hour. I walked into a room and paused, staring at the walls as if I'd forgotten why I came. I let my hands shake once when I lifted a glass. I watched Selene's eyes brighten when she thought she'd caught me slipping. I watched her bring her phone out faster, the camera aimed at my face, her voice coated in false concern. "Mama, you okay?" she'd say, not touching me, not helping, just filming. Some days, she didn't even try to hide it anymore. She'd sit across from me on the sofa, phone held casually in her lap, lens tilted up just enough to capture me in the frame while she pretended to scroll. When I forgot a word and corrected myself, she'd smile like she'd won a prize. Her confidence grew, and with it, her carelessness. She started leaving little things out. Pill-shaped tablets in a zip bag tucked into her purse pocket. A small bottle rolling under the bathroom cabinet. The faint medicinal smell on her hands when she handed me a cup. Once, I saw her wipe the rim of my mug with a napkin after she set it down, as if she didn't want fingerprints on something that should have been innocent. I didn't confront, I stored it. In my mind, in my notes, in my bones. And then one afternoon when I pretended to be knocked out on the couch again, I heard Selene moving around me like I was furniture, and I felt her shadow settle over my face. I expected the usual, her whispering into the phone, her giggling at my old age. Instead, I heard the soft click of her camera starting, closer than ever before. The lens wasn't aimed from across the room this time. It was inches from my face. She crouched down beside me, and in a voice so low it almost sounded tender, she said, "Sleep, Mama." Then she angled the phone to capture my slack mouth, my limp hands, my chest rising and falling, like she needed the world to see not just that I was confused, but that I was helpless. And as she filmed, her other hand reached for my wrist, fingers pressing lightly against my pulse, not to check on me, but to prove to herself that I couldn't fight back. The call came at a time of day. My son almost never called me unless something was wrong. Late morning. The house was bright and quiet. So when Selene had finally stopped hovering long enough for me to move without her eyes tracking every step, I was in the laundry room folding towels slowly on purpose, still wearing my little performance of weakness like a shawl. When people believe you're fragile, they stop watching for strength. My phone buzzed against the top of the dryer. When I saw Darnell's name on the screen, and my stomach made that small, sharp flip mothers know too well, the instinct that reminds you your child can still break you even after he's grown. I wiped my hands on my pants and answered. I forced my voice to sound normal, careful, not accusing. "Hey, baby." His voice came through the speaker, warm and quick. "Ma, you okay?" Too quick. Too ready, like he'd been waiting for the moment to sound like the concerned son. There was noise behind him, muffled voices, an elevator chime, just the faint rumble of luggage wheels rolling across tile, business trip sounds, all the little details that tell you someone is somewhere else. "I'm fine," I said gently, because I needed him relaxed. I needed him to believe I believed him. "How's the trip?" "Busy," he replied immediately. "Long days, meetings back to back." Then, without even pausing, he added something that made my hands freeze around the towel I was holding. "Celine said you've been sleeping a lot," Selene said. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it climb into my voice. "She been talking about me?" I asked softly. Darnell gave a small laugh, the kind people use when they want to soften a situation before steering it somewhere else. "You know she worries," he said. "She's just trying to help." Help. The word almost made me choke, because I could still feel Selene's fingers pressing against my wrist that day, while she filmed me like I was a specimen on a lab table. I stepped quietly into the hallway where the walls swallowed sound. "Darnell," I said, lowering my voice slightly. "I need to tell you something." A pause. "I need you to listen without interrupting." Another small pause. Not long, just long enough to tell me he had expected a different kind of conversation. "Okay," he said. His voice sharpened slightly, attention switching on. I chose my words carefully, the way you choose where to step when you're walking across a dark room. A man came to the house," I said. "Not maintenance, not a neighbor. A man Selene let in like she knew him." Darnell didn't speak, but his breathing changed slightly. I kept going. "They were close," I added quietly. "Too comfortable." "What do you mean?" he asked, and there it was. Just enough confusion to sound human. Just enough. I exhaled slowly. "They talked about medication," I said. I let that word sit in the air between us. He asked her if I'd been sleeping longer. Then I added the part that had kept echoing in my head all morning. He said the amount was working. Silence filled the line. Not shocked silence. Not the silence of someone struggling to understand. The silence of someone calculating. Then Darnell's voice returned. Too steady. "Ma, listen," he said calmly. "Don't do anything right now. Don't confront Selene." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Why?" I asked. Not because I expected an answer, because I wanted to hear how he avoided it. Darnell didn't answer the question. He stepped around it like a man walking carefully around broken glass. "Just don't," he said. "Rest. Stay calm. I'm coming back soon and I'll fix everything when I get home." Fix everything. He said it like a promise, like he could walk through the front door and smooth poison out of the air with a hug. Then he added something that made the hallway feel colder. "And Ma," he said gently, "don't start switching things up. Don't change your routine." My breath caught. "That'll just make her act different," he continued. "We need to see what she's doing. Don't change your routine." I stared at the blank hallway wall. My fingers tightened around my phone. He didn't know I had already changed my routine. He didn't know I had poured the coffee down the sink. He didn't know I was recording. And yet here he was, calmly instructing me to keep drinking the thing that was slowly making me disappear. I forced a small sound into my throat. A weak, little, "Okay." It felt like swallowing glass. "I just want you safe," Darnell said quickly, like he could hear the silence sharpening on my end. "I'll be on the next flight back, all right? Just stay quiet." Quiet, rest, routine. Every instruction sounded less like protection and more like direction. "All right," I whispered, and he exhaled softly. Relief slipped through the line like air escaping pressure. "Good," he said. "Good, I'll call you later." The call ended. I stood there with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the empty hum of the line like it might say something else. My pulse thudded in my throat. My mind replayed the last minute piece by piece. His speed, his steadiness. The way he never asked the questions a truly shocked son would ask first. He didn't ask what the man looked like. And he didn't ask his name. He didn't ask how Selena knew him. He didn't even ask if I was sure. He only told me what to do. I turned slowly toward the living room where Seleni's footsteps moved faintly across the floor, and the realization settled inside my chest like a stone that refused to move. If my son didn't care who that man was, it meant he already knew. After I hung up with Darnell, I didn't march into the living room and accuse Celine of anything. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't let my voice shake. I did the opposite. I moved like a woman who had decided to disappear on purpose, because when people think you're slipping, they stop hiding the sharp edges. I made myself a small lunch I didn't eat, carried the plate into the kitchen so Selene could see me moving like normal. Then I rinsed it off and set it in the rack. And I even let myself yawn once, exaggerated, just to feed the picture she'd been painting. Then, when she went upstairs to take a quick shower, I walked to the study and closed the door behind me like I was only looking for peace. That room still smelled faintly like my late husband, paper, cologne that had soaked into leather, the kind of quiet a man leaves behind when he built his life with intention. The study had always been his place to think, a room where nothing got moved without purpose. So even after he was gone, I'd kept it the same because grief feels safer when it's organized. But that day, grief wasn't what brought me in. Fear did, and something colder than fear, a need for leverage. I went to the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet where he kept what he called the backbone. I hadn't opened it in a long time because it felt like opening a wound. It stuck for a moment, and when it finally gave, the drawer slid out with a soft scrape, or revealing labeled folders. Clean handwriting, neat lines, the kind of order that made you believe nothing bad could happen in a house like this. One folder sat in front with a strip of tape across the top. Governance. I pulled it out and sat at the desk. My hands were steady, but I could feel something trembling inside my chest, like a warning bell trying to ring without making a sound. Inside were thick documents, company papers, meeting notes, signatures, dates. Not a love letter. Not a confession. Nothing dramatic. Just structure. My husband had built our business the way he built everything else, with layers, with gates, with rules that didn't depend on anyone's feelings. I flipped through pages slowly, reading enough to understand the shape of it without letting my eyes glaze over. I saw charts and terms and signatures from years ago. I saw my name on more than one page, placed there like a lock. And then I saw something that made the back of my neck tighten, a section about authority and incapacity. The words were plain, almost boring, the way legal protections often are until you need them. If questions arose about decision-making, certain steps had to be followed. Certain people had to be notified. Certain processes had to happen before anyone could step in. My husband had put it all in writing long before he died. Like he'd been laying boards across a bridge he knew I might someday have to cross in the dark. I turned another page and saw references to independent review and required oversight. I didn't fully understand every line, but I understood the intention. Nobody could just claim I wasn't fit and take what was mine. There were rules that had to be triggered. There were tripwires. That gave me a strange kind of comfort, but it also made a new fear rise. Why would he build this if he never imagined someone would try? The thought of Darnell flickered in my mind and I shoved it back down. Not yet. Not until I had proof. I kept reading. The deeper I went, the more I felt my husband's presence. Not as a ghost, but as a mind that watched people carefully and chose safety over sentiment. He wasn't the kind of man who made speeches. He didn't say, "Hi, I'm doing this because I don't trust them." He did it quietly and let the paper speak for him later. And then I reached a page near the back with a small, sticky note attached to the bottom corner. His handwriting was there again. The same neat slant I used to watch at the kitchen table when he balanced numbers and drank tea. The note wasn't long. It didn't explain. It didn't accuse. It simply said, "Protection only works if you use it." I stared at that line until my eyes stung. The message felt like a hand on my shoulder, steady, firm, reminding me that what he left me wasn't just money and property. He left me a way to survive betrayal without begging for mercy. But the sentence also held a warning, sharp and quiet. Protection unused is just paper. I sat back in the chair, listening for movement upstairs, listening for Selene's shower to shut off. My mind moved through the last few days like a needle threading fabric. Coffee, sleep, filming, the man. Darnell's controlled voice telling me not to change my routine. My stomach turned. The documents in front of me suddenly didn't feel like business paperwork. They felt like a weapon waiting to be picked up. I flipped the page again, searching for something, anything, that told me exactly what use it meant. And that's when I saw a tabbed section marked in my husband's handwriting, the tab so old it had softened at the edges. Underlined twice, Capacity Challenge Protocol. My fingers paused on the tab, and I realized with a slow, sinking certainty that whatever Selene and Darnell were doing, my husband had built a response for it long before I ever tasted that first strange cup of coffee. I didn't sleep that night. Not because Selena made noise, because the quiet had changed. The house still looked like my house. The same framed photos on the hallway wall, the same throw pillows sagging on the couch, or the same kitchen light that flickered if you didn't twist the bulb all the way in. But the air felt different. Occupied. A plan has weight. Even when nobody says it out loud, you can feel it in small things. Doors closing softer than usual, footsteps avoiding certain floorboards, voices becoming careful around you, like you're already fragile. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening for Selene moving in the next room, or listening for the faint buzz of her phone charger against the outlet. And I kept hearing my husband's voice in my memory, steady and practical the way it always was. Protection only works if you use it. By morning, my fear had cooled into something steadier. Intention. I moved through the house the way Selene expected me to. Slow. Distracted, letting my hands drift across furniture like my mind wandered with them. I let her make the coffee, not because I planned to drink it, and because I wanted to see what she did when she believed she was winning. Selene handed me the mug with that same soft smile she always used. "Drink it while it's hot, Mama." Her eyes followed the cup to my lips, tracking, waiting. I raised it slowly and tilted it just enough to make the motion believable. Then I stood up, carrying the mug toward the kitchen like I needed to rinse something. When I opened the cabinet door, it blocked her view just long enough. I tipped the cup. The coffee slid into the sink. Dark, silent, gone. I filled the mug with plain hot water again and carried it back to the couch. Then I let my shoulders sag. My head tilted. My breathing slowed. I let my body become the story Selena wanted to tell. She moved through the living room humming quietly, far too calm for a woman supposedly caring for an aging mother-in-law. Every few seconds she glanced toward the hallway clock, timing something, waiting. Now when the minute hand passed the point where the drug should have started working, I let my head fall sideways against the couch cushion. My mouth slackened. My hands loosened in my lap. Selene approached slowly, but she didn't check my pulse. She didn't whisper my name. She simply smoothed the sleeve of my cardigan like someone straightening a sheet, satisfied. Then she walked to the front door. The lock clicked. The door opened, and that same man stepped inside again. Hard soles on wood. Confident pause. No hesitation. I forced the anger burning in my chest to stay buried. Anger changes your breathing. The man spoke immediately. "How'd she take it?" Selene answered quickly. "Easy. She didn't even look at the cup twice." The man made a low, approving sound. "Good," he said. "She's trained now." Trained. My fingertips tingled with the urge to curl into fists. Selene gave a soft laugh. "It's sad," she said without a trace of sadness. She thinks it's age." The man moved deeper into the house. Something rustled on the kitchen counter, paper or a small bag being set down. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, not casual anymore, instructional. "What you're giving her isn't just making her sleepy," he said. "It's changing how her brain functions." Selene lowered her voice. "She's been forgetting things," she admitted. "Small things, words, where she leaves things." The man didn't sound surprised. That's expected," he said calmly. "In older adults, this sedative doesn't always look like sleep." He spoke slowly, like he was describing product features. "It can look like confusion, memory problems, balance issues." Selene repeated one word carefully. "Balance." "Yes," he said. "She'll start walking slower, maybe holding onto walls, maybe stumbling." He paused. "That's when you become concerned. That's when you say you're worried about her decline." Celine's breath caught. "And the doctors will believe it?" "If you build the story properly," he replied, "they see it every day. Early dementia, cognitive decline." Then he added something that made my stomach tighten. "And you already have the videos." Videos. Images of me slumped on the couch, my mouth slack, my eyes heavy. Evidence. Selene spoke again. "Darnell wants this done quickly." My son's name dropped into the room like a heavy plate hitting the floor. The man didn't react with surprise. Then he reacted like someone who had already been briefed. "This can't be rushed," he said calmly. "Courts move on patterns. Medical notes. Witness statements." Selene asked quietly, "So what happens when they believe it?" The man didn't hesitate. "When the court questions her mental capacity," he said, "your husband becomes the legal decision maker." My body went cold. Selena whispered almost excitedly, "And then everything transfers the way Darnell planned." The man didn't correct her. He simply said one word, "Exactly." I lay there motionless on the couch, but inside me, the truth settled hard and permanent. They weren't just trying to make me look forgetful. They were preparing to erase me, legally. The man stepped closer to the couch. His shadow fell across my face. "We should test her reflexes next," he said quietly. "See how her body responds." Selene nodded. "Oh, okay." Then she added softly, "She won't know." My face stayed slack. My breathing stayed slow. But one thought burned clear inside my mind. I have to use what my husband left me before they get to the part where I can't. After I heard the words, "decision maker," I stopped thinking like a frightened woman in her own house and started thinking like an owner who needed to survive her employees. That night, I waited until Selene's bedroom door shut and the house went still. Then I slipped back into the study with socks on my feet so the floor wouldn't betray me. I didn't turn on the overhead light. I used the small desk lamp, the one that casts a tight circle and keeps the rest of the room in shadow, because I wasn't trying to feel safe. I was trying to be careful. I pulled the governance folder back out and laid it open like a map. My husband had always told me, "If you ever feel confused, don't argue with people, check paper." Paper doesn't charm you. And paper doesn't lie with a smile. Paper tells you what is true even when your own family wants you uncertain. I started with the sections that looked most used, creased corners, tabs, pages that had been lifted and returned, authority, ownership, transfer. My eyes moved slowly, not because I couldn't read fast, but because I needed to understand. I needed to know what Darnell thought he was stealing and what he believed he was entitled to. And the first truth hit me like a deep breath after being underwater. The business wasn't his. Not yet. Not the way he acted like it was. My husband had structured everything in my name. Control, voting rights, signatures required for certain actions. Darnell worked there, yes, he had a title. He had respect. He had access to meetings and staff, and the pride of walking through a building with our family name on it. But control? Control was still mine. My husband had left him influence, not power. I felt anger flicker at that. Not because I wanted my son powerless, but because I understood the insult Darnell must have felt living under it. A grown man who thinks he's owed a throne will always resent the person holding the crown. I turned pages and found the part that mattered most. It wasn't dramatic. It was one clean statement buried in the middle of a paragraph. Ownership remains with the surviving spouse, and any shift of authority happens only upon death or declared incapacity. Death. Incapacity. My throat went dry. That was it. That was the whole road they were paving with my naps and Selena's videos. They weren't just trying to embarrass me with forgetfulness. They were trying to force the business into the only two conditions where Darnell could take it without my consent. I leaned back in the chair and let the weight of that settle through my body. My husband had not built this like an emotional man trying to punish his son. He built it like a strategist protecting an empire from impatience. And that meant he must have known something about Darnell's nature, something he never said aloud, something he handled in ink. I heard footsteps upstairs and froze. The sound paused. A bathroom door opened, then shut. Celine. I waited until the pipe stopped running, then turned the page again. I found notes from prior meetings, board acknowledgments, signatures, dates that went back years. Everything was consistent, and everything was reinforced. My husband didn't just set it up once, he maintained it, like he expected pressure, like he expected someone to try to pry it loose. And then I noticed something else, a separate section on property holdings, the rental houses, the smaller commercial units, the steady income that never slept. I'd always thought of them as a cushion. Now I realized they were the engine. My signature controlled those too. Those accounts paid taxes, paid staff, and fed the business even when sales dipped. If Darnell could get legal authority over me, he wouldn't just get a title at the company, he'd get the cash flow that keeps a man in control. I remembered Celine's voice in the kitchen saying, "And then everything transfers the way Darnell said." That line wasn't guesswork, it was knowledge. They had studied the same pages I was studying now. They weren't improvising, they were executing. I closed my eyes for a moment and let myself feel the hurt. Because it was there, raw and honest. Darnell was the baby I carried through storms. He was the child who used to press his forehead into my belly when he was scared. He was the boy who cried when his father died and begged me not to leave him too. And now, he was the man arranging for me to be erased by law so he could inherit what he didn't have the patience to earn. That realization didn't just break my heart. It sharpened it. I opened my eyes and looked down at the documents again. The motive stood up clear as daylight. Darnell didn't need me dead for money. He needed me incapable for control. That was why the drugging had to look like decline. That was why Celine had to film the episodes. That was why he told me not to change my routine. He needed the pattern to stay consistent long enough to convince other people it was real. I turned to the back of the folder, searching for anything that showed how they planned to trigger the legal process. Then, as my fingers slid behind a tab, I found a thin stack of printed pages that didn't match my husband's formatting. Newer paper, newer ink, a packet clipped neatly together with a cover page that made my stomach drop. Request for capacity evaluation. And right beneath the heading, in bold, was the name of the person who submitted it. The words on the cover page didn't shout. They didn't accuse. They just sat there, calm and official. The way danger often does when it's dressed in clean fonts and pretending to be procedure. Request for capacity evaluation. I stared at the title for a long moment, my fingers still hooked behind the folder tab, like I had opened a drawer and discovered a knife inside. The paper felt crisp, too crisp. New. It carried the faint smell of warm printer ink, the kind that tells you the pages hadn't been pulled from an old file cabinet. Someone had printed this recently, prepared it, planned it. I slid the packet out carefully, keeping the pages aligned so they wouldn't whisper against each other. The last thing I needed was Celine hearing paper shuffle and appearing in the doorway with that bright voice of hers. "Mama, what you doing?" I laid the packet flat on the desk and pulled the lamp closer. The yellow light spread across the page like an interrogation. The second page contained a list: checkboxes, clinical language, observed symptoms, confusion, forgetfulness, excessive daytime sleepiness, unsteady gait, changes in judgment. My stomach tightened. It was written like someone describing me, but the language had been stripped of anything human. No mention of who I was. No mention that I had built the house they were standing in. No mention that the woman being evaluated once ran a company, balanced contracts, negotiated deals, and raised a son who now apparently believed she was fading. Just a patient, a case, and a person to be examined. I turned the page slowly. The next section listed supporting documentation, space for videos, space for witness statements, evidence. My eyes moved toward the margin where someone had written small notes in pen. Neat handwriting. Efficient. Attach clips. Include timeline. Emphasize repetition. Whoever wrote those notes knew exactly how stories become evidence. They weren't recording my decline. They were constructing it. I flipped another page, and a draft letter appeared, addressed to a medical office. The tone was polite, concerned, full of the soft, careful tenderness Celine liked to wrap around her cruelty. The letter explained that the family was worried, that changes had been observed, that episodes seemed to be increasing, that a professional evaluation was requested as soon as possible. I looked up at the date printed at the top. For a moment, my brain refused to understand it. Then it did. And the packet wasn't dated yesterday. It wasn't written after I first noticed the strange naps. It wasn't even recent. The document had been prepared weeks earlier, before I poured out my coffee, before I pretended to sleep on the couch, before I ever heard the word dosage whispered in my own kitchen. They weren't reacting to a problem. They were building one. My fingers turned the next page. And that's when I saw the section labeled Requester Information, Name, Relationship, Contact Number. My eyes moved downward slowly, almost cautiously because part of me still wanted to believe Celine was acting alone. I expected to see her name, maybe her handwriting, maybe some explanation that my son had been fooled. But the name printed there erased every excuse I had left. Darnell Jefferson, my son. My mouth went dry. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. Then I blinked hard and looked again. But ink doesn't rearrange itself just because your heart asks it to. The packet belonged to him, not in theory, not in suspicion, in writing. Under the name was his phone number, his personal number, the same one I had dialed thousands of times over the years for school pickups, late-night emergencies, and small moments when mothers simply need to hear their child's voice. My hand moved toward my own phone instinctively. For one reckless second, I thought about calling him right then, demanding answers. But his voice from earlier replayed in my head, smooth concern, careful instructions, the way he told me not to change my routine, as if he needed everything to stay on schedule. My stomach rolled. That wasn't a son protecting his mother. That was a man managing a timeline. I forced myself to keep reading. Denial is comfortable, but it kills you slowly. The packet included a timeline summary. Someone had already begun filling it in. Dates. Morning coffee noted. She observed nap, confused upon waking, forgot conversation. Every entry written like my life had already been narrated by someone else. Then I noticed another detail that made the room feel colder. The document referenced absence due to travel. It explained that the requester might not be physically present during certain incidents. It was written carefully, deliberately, like a shield. My son's business trip wasn't just coincidence. It was part of the story. Darnell away. Darnell busy. Darnell concerned but unable to witness the episodes. Distance, innocence, plausible ignorance. If anyone questioned him later, he would already have the answer prepared. I wasn't there, he could say. I was out of town. And Celine would nod beside him with that soft voice of hers, offering sympathy and tears. My hands began to tremble, not from fear of Celine, from the betrayal sitting in my own bloodline. I pressed my palm flat against the packet. The paper felt solid, real. This wasn't a nightmare. This was preparation. A rope they had been braiding slowly while smiling across the breakfast table. I stacked the pages neatly and slid the packet into the folder I had started keeping in secret. Then I listened carefully. No footsteps outside the study door. No voice calling my name. I looked up at the framed photograph on my husband's desk, the one where he stood beside Darnell on the company floor, both of them smiling with pride. And for a moment, something inside my chest cracked cleanly in half. Then my eyes dropped back to the packet, back to the single line that made every sweet cup of coffee suddenly look like a weapon. Requester, Darnell Jefferson. I carried the packet to my bedroom like it was a newborn and a bomb at the same time. Something fragile, something dangerous, something I couldn't afford to drop. I didn't tuck it away in the study where it belonged, because the study had become a battlefield. And Celine moved through that hallway too freely. Instead, I slid it beneath a stack of folded sweaters in my dresser drawer, right under my hands, right under my control. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my own wall until the room stopped tilting. The grief was the first thing that tried to rise. Grief for my husband, grief for the lie my life had become, grief for the boy I raised, turning into a man who could sign his name under something like this. But grief, by itself, doesn't protect you. Grief makes you soft. So I pressed it down and pulled the packet back out because denial was the last luxury I had. I needed to see it again. I needed to study it like a stranger would, because mothers always try to explain their children before they accept them. Under the lamp in my room, the words looked even cleaner. Requester, Darnell Jefferson. Not typed by mistake, not scribbled by someone else. Printed like a fact that had already been agreed upon. And I flipped through the pages more carefully this time, and the deeper I went, the clearer it became that Celine hadn't created this plan. She was moving pieces. Yes, she was drugging me, filming me, staging me. But the blueprint had my son's fingerprints all over it. The packet referenced assets and responsibilities Celine wouldn't have known without Darnell explaining them. Then it listed the business as family-owned entity with specifics that sounded like the language my son used when he talked about work. Confident, corporate, always eager to prove he understood the machine. There was a section that suggested temporary authority for urgent decisions. And I could practically hear Darnell's voice behind it, the way he always framed his wants as, "What makes sense?" I turned another page and saw the tone shift. Less about medical concern, more about continuity, a phrase that meant one thing in a boardroom and another thing in a home. Keep the power flowing where it benefits you. My fingers tightened on the paper until the edges creased. Celine didn't care about continuity. Celine cared about convenience, about comfort, about whatever promises Darnell fed her behind closed doors. But this was strategy. This was a son who knew exactly what he was doing. And I leaned back against my headboard and forced myself to breathe through the hurt. I thought about the way Celine had looked at me when she pressed my wrist to feel my pulse. Not worried, not scared, but curious. Like she was measuring how far she could go. A woman like that doesn't invent a legal pathway. She follows one. She executes. And the person who benefits most from my incapacity is not Celine. It's Darnell, my own child. The realization didn't crash into me like a wave. It settled like ice. Quiet. Complete. There was no room left for maybe. The man who came into my living room wasn't her secret lover. He was a tool, a contractor, and Celine was the hand holding the tool. But Darnell was the one who bought it, the one who pointed it at me. I heard my son's voice from the call again, and this time it sounded different in my memory. Don't confront Celine. Rest. Don't change your routine. At the time, it felt like control. Now it sounded like instruction, or like a manager keeping a project on schedule. I opened my phone and pulled up the call log. His last call sat there with the timestamp, tidy and innocent. I clicked on it and stared at the number like it might confess. Then I stared at my own hands, the same hands that had braided his hair, held his fevered forehead, signed permission slips, and balanced bills when there wasn't enough money to breathe. I wanted to cry. All but crying would give Celine exactly what she wanted, proof that I was unraveling. So I did what my husband always did when he needed to win without raising his voice. I took notes. I wrote down the date on the packet, the checkboxes, the references to videos, the section about travel, the fact that Darnell had already prepared an absence into his narrative. I wrote down every phrase that sounded like him, every line that smelled like planning. The more I wrote, the calmer I became. Not because I was okay, but because clarity is a strange kind of medicine. Clarity tells you where to step next. And then, like a cruel joke, I heard Celine's laughter downstairs, light, bright, relaxed, the sound of someone who believes the house belongs to her. My jaw tightened. I stood up, slid the packet back into my drawer, and smoothed the top sweater as if nothing had moved. I walked to my bedroom door and opened it slowly, listening. Celine's voice carried up from the kitchen, sweet and casual, talking on the phone. He says we're on track, she said, and my stomach clenched so hard it hurt. Then she added softer, like a secret meant only for the person on the other end. He just wants it done before he gets back. I didn't sleep much after I heard Celine say we're on track. That sentence kept circling my mind like a fly that refuses to land. On track. Those two words meant there was a schedule. It meant my confusion wasn't random. It meant my decline was being managed like a project, and the only reason I was still standing inside that house was because I had stopped being a victim and started becoming a witness. By sunrise, I was already moving, not loudly, not dramatically, just with purpose. Celine stood in the kitchen when I came downstairs, humming softly while pouring herself juice like the world around her was clean. She looked up and smiled. Morning. Mama. There it was again, that soft word she liked to wrap around sharp intentions. I smiled back. I even let my shoulders droop a little, feeding her the tired look she expected. Then I asked a question I already knew the answer to. What day is it again? Celine's lips twitched with quiet satisfaction before she answered. Thursday, she said gently. Her phone was already in her hand, angled low, ready, recording. I gave her what she wanted. I blinked slowly and murmured, I embarrassed. Oh, right. Then I turned away carefully, walking toward the hallway like my balance wasn't quite steady. My own phone rested quietly in my pocket. The recording app already running. 2 phones, 2 stories. Only one would survive. The first proof I needed was inside my body. Not suspicion, not opinion. Evidence no one could argue with once it was printed on paper. Later that morning, I sat in my car at the end of the driveway with the doors closed and the windows up. Like I was hiding from my own house. I called my doctor's office. My voice trembled just enough to sound worried, not hysterical, just a woman who knew something wasn't right. I've been having strange fatigue, I told the nurse. Confusion sometimes. I fall asleep suddenly. She asked if I could come in tomorrow. Could it be today? I asked quietly. A pause. Then I added one sentence that changed her tone. I don't feel safe waiting. That did it. And they squeezed me in that afternoon. When I told Celine I needed to pick up a prescription refill, she immediately offered to come with me, too quickly. "I can drive you, Mama." "No, baby," I said warmly. "You stay here. I'll be right back." She hesitated. Then she smiled. "Okay." But her eyes followed me to the door like she was calculating something. At the clinic, I sat beneath fluorescent lights that made everyone look older than they were. When my doctor entered the room, and I told him the truth, carefully, piece by piece. "I keep getting sleepy after coffee," I said. "Not normal sleepy. I lose hours." His expression changed slightly, professional, focused. He asked about medications. "No." "Supplements?" "No." Then he asked a question that hung in the air. "Does anyone prepare your food or drinks?" I looked down at my hands resting in my lap. Let the silence stretch just long enough to speak for me. "My daughter-in-law brings my coffee," I said quietly, "and sometimes she records me when I drift off." My doctor didn't jump to conclusions. He didn't accuse anyone, but his voice shifted. "We can run some tests," he said. "Blood work and urine. Certain sedatives will appear if they're present." My heart pounded. "Please," I whispered. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, but beneath the fear, I could see something rising again. The woman who built a life. Not the woman who didn't beg. I gave the samples. Then I waited. The second proof I needed was outside my body. The pills, the visits, the quiet exchanges Celine thought I never noticed. When I returned home, I continued my performance. I let Celine hand me coffee. I pretended to drink it. I timed my sleep. But I also started documenting everything. My phone hidden beneath couch cushions, inside open drawers, behind stacks of magazines. Whenever Celine's purse sat open, I took quick, silent photos. A small bottle, a white zip bag, nothing dramatic, but real. One evening, she walked past holding a pill bottle loosely in her hand while answering a call. She didn't realize I snapped a picture as she passed. Not perfect, but clear enough. The clinic called the next morning. I stepped outside to answer. My heart beat so loudly I almost missed the nurse's voice. "Miss Jefferson," she said gently, "your test results show sedatives in your system." My throat tightened. Sedatives not listed in your medical records. Proof, not suspicion. Proof. I thanked her and ended the call. For a long moment, I stood in the driveway staring at my own front door. The most painful part wasn't the chemical in my blood. It was knowing my son wanted it there. I walked back inside. Celine hummed in the kitchen like nothing in the world was wrong, but I already knew the next move. And I stepped into the study and dialed the number my husband had written down years ago. The family lawyer answered on the second ring. "Cambria," he said. His voice sounded like safety. "It's me," I replied quietly. "I need to activate the protections my husband put in place. Today." There was no long explanation, no sympathy speech. He asked only one question. "Are you in immediate danger?" I looked toward the kitchen. Celine's voice floated through the house, bright, carefree, and I lowered my voice. "Yes." A pause. Then the lawyer spoke again, calm, precise. "Then listen carefully," he said. "Do not confront anyone. Do not warn them. And bring me every piece of proof you have before the end of the day." The house announced Darnell before I even saw him. Tires rolled into the driveway with a confidence that didn't match the urgent flight story he had sold me over the phone. A car door slammed. Luggage wheels clicked across the porch boards. And then keys, his keys, hit the front lock like they belonged there more than I did. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup in front of me, steam rising slowly, my hands wrapped around it the way Celine expected, sleepy, weak, grateful for help. The lawyer had been clear. Do not confront anyone. Do not warn them. Do not show them the shift in power. So I kept my shoulders slumped and my face soft, even though something inside my chest had hardened into steel. Celine moved around the kitchen pretending to be calm, but her movements were too bright, too quick. She checked her phone twice in less than a minute, then glanced toward the front window again like she was waiting for a signal. When the door finally opened, she turned instantly. "Baby!" she called, her voice filled with relief. Darnell answered from the hallway. "I'm here." The words came out warm and deep, the way men speak when they know someone is listening, and I heard the heavy drop of his bag hitting the floor, a deliberate sound, an entrance. He walked into the kitchen a second later with his arms already half open, like he was stepping into a scene he had rehearsed. He looked good. Too good. Fresh haircut, clean jacket, eyes sharp. Not the face of a man who had rushed home in panic. His gaze landed on me first, and I watched that gaze carefully, because eyes always reveal the truth before the mouth has time to lie. Now, for the briefest second, his eyes scanned my posture, measuring, checking. Then his expression softened instantly. Concern settled across his face like makeup. "Ma," he said, dropping to one knee beside my chair. He took my hands gently. "You okay? You look tired." I let my eyelids flutter. "I've been feeling off," I whispered. His thumb rubbed across my knuckles slowly, the same gesture he used when he was a boy apologizing for breaking something. "It's all right," he said softly. I'm home now." Then he stood, and the warmth disappeared. He turned towards Celine. The temperature in his voice dropped. "Celine." She froze. Her smile wavered. "What?" she asked lightly. Darnell straightened his jacket like a man preparing for court. "Don't act like you don't know." Celine blinked. "Darnell, what are you talking about?" His finger shot toward the living room. "I know about the man." The sentence shattered the air in the room, and Celine's face drained of color instantly. "What man?" she whispered. Darnell laughed once, sharp, mocking. "Don't play stupid," he snapped. "You've been bringing some guy into my mother's house while I'm gone." Then he turned back to me, his eyes filled with righteous anger. "Ma, I swear I didn't know," he said quickly. "I swear I didn't." I watched him carefully, because the strange part was how close he came to the truth while still lying. He didn't know about the man as a lover. He knew about the man as a tool, but he was offering the easiest story first, the one where Celine looked like the villain, and he looked like the hero. Celine stepped forward, hands shaking. "Baby, listen," she said. "It's not what?" Darnell barked. His voice grew louder. He started pacing the kitchen like he wanted witnesses. "Not cheating? Not disrespect? Not sneaking strangers into my mother's house?" Celine's eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. But in that glance, I saw something unexpected. Not guilt, panic. Darnell saw it too. His jaw tightened. He gestured toward me sharply. "Look at her," he said. "My mother's been sleeping all day, confused, out of it. And you telling me it's just age?" He shook his head with theatrical disgust. "You've been stressing her out. You've been making her sick." Celine's lips trembled. "Darnell." "No," he snapped. "Oh, don't you Darnell me." He knelt beside me again and squeezed my hands tightly. "Ma, I'm going to handle this," he promised. "I'm going to protect you." Protect. The same word he had used earlier on the phone. I watched how easily it came out of his mouth, how smoothly it fit. Then he stood again and faced Celine. His voice dropped low, controlled. "You're going to tell me everything. Right now." Celine swallowed. "I can explain," she whispered. Darnell's anger snapped back instantly. "Explain what?" he shouted. "Explain why you've been lying. Explain why you bringing strangers around my mother?" He slammed his palm on the counter. Celine flinched. The sound echoed through the kitchen, but I stayed perfectly still, watching. because the more he performed, the more the seams showed. His anger arrived too quickly, too polished. His accusations were carefully shaped to keep my attention on Celine, not on the paperwork with his name printed across it. And the biggest tell of all was what he didn't do. He didn't ask for the man's name. He didn't ask where she met him. He didn't call the police. He didn't threaten divorce. He simply demanded a confession in front of me, like this entire scene had been staged for an audience of one. Then he said something he clearly didn't mean to say. "You messed up the timing," Darnell hissed. You were supposed to be more careful." Celine froze. Her eyes widened, and in the silence that followed, the truth settled over the room like cold air. There had always been a schedule, a plan, and Darnell believed it belonged to him. Darnell moved quickly after his little performance in my kitchen, the way a man moves when he believes the audience has accepted his story. For the next day, he stayed close to me, hovering in small, careful ways that looked like devotion to anyone who didn't know him. He made tea, adjusted my pillow, spoke slowly like he was choosing words that wouldn't confuse me. Celine stayed quiet through it all, her eyes red, her posture small, playing the role of the woman who had been caught and corrected. Every time Darnell looked at her, he wore disappointment like a coat. Every time he looked at me, he wore concern. And beneath both expressions, I could feel something else humming inside him, urgency. The same urgency that made him hiss about timing. By the second morning, he said it. "Ma, we should meet with the attorney." He said it gently, just to make sure everything is in order. In order. The words sounded helpful, responsible, like he was offering structure instead of steering me into a trap. I agreed immediately. That surprised him. I saw it in the brief lift of his eyebrows, or the way his shoulders relaxed just slightly. He thought my agreement meant the drugs were working. He thought my silence meant confusion, not strategy. The meeting took place in a private conference room at the lawyer's office. Clean walls, a heavy oak table, a small bowl of mints in the center no one bothered touching. The room smelled faintly of paper and polished wood, the kind of place where people pretend they're civilized while quietly planning to take things from each other. And the family lawyer greeted me calmly, the same calm voice he used on the phone, but when our eyes met, the message was clear: stay steady. Darnell sat beside me, close enough to look protective. Celine sat across from him, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She avoided looking at me for long. When she did, her eyes slid away quickly. Darnell began speaking almost immediately. Of course he did. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, voice warm and careful. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice," he said. "I'm worried about my mother." The lawyer nodded once. "Tell me what's happening." Darnell didn't start with paperwork. He started with a story, a clean one. "She's been sleeping a lot," he said. "Sometimes she forgets things." He glanced at me with practiced sadness. "She repeats questions. Seems disoriented." He paused to let the words settle into the room. "I just want to make sure she's protected," he continued. "Wait, that her assets are protected, that the business stays stable if her health declines." Health declines. He said it gently, like he was doing me a kindness by naming my downfall. I kept my face calm. My hands rested on the table with the faintest tremble, just enough weakness to look believable. The lawyer listened without interrupting. Then he turned toward me. "Cambria," he said quietly, "do you feel unable to manage your own affairs?" The room went still, and Darnell leaned toward me slightly, ready to catch me if I fell into the story he built. Celine held her breath. I looked at my son, then back at the lawyer. "No," I said simply, "I don't." Darnell chuckled softly, like he was embarrassed for me. "Ma," he said gently, "you don't have to be proud about this. We're family." Family. He used that word like a leash. The lawyer didn't respond to Darnell's performance. Instead, he opened his briefcase and removed a thick binder on my husband's company bylaws. He placed it on the table with a quiet, solid thud. "Your father was very deliberate," the lawyer said, looking at Darnell. "He prepared for situations exactly like this." Darnell nodded quickly. "Right," he said. "That's why we came." The lawyer flipped to a tabbed section. "There is a clause," he continued, "that activates whenever Cambria's mental capacity is questioned in a way that could transfer authority." Darnell leaned forward. "Of course," he said smoothly. "That makes sense." The lawyer turned another page. "Part of that clause requires an independent medical investigation." Darnell nodded again. Then the lawyer added one more sentence, "including toxicology screening." The air in the room shifted instantly. Celine's head snapped up. Darnell's jaw tightened. Only slightly, but I saw it. A man can hide anger, but surprise is harder. "Toxicology," Darnell said, blinking. Why would—" The lawyer finally looked up. Calm. Patient. "Because your father understood something important," he said. "If someone ever claims incapacity, the cause matters." Silence stretched across the room. The faint hum of the air conditioner sounded suddenly louder. Celine's breathing grew shallow. Darnell forced a laugh. "That's thorough," he said lightly. "But I don't see how that's relevant. My mother's just—" "It is relevant," the lawyer said. He didn't raise his voice, and he simply cut the sentence cleanly in half. Then he closed the binder and placed a manila envelope on the table. Slowly, deliberately. "As the bylaws require," he continued, "I initiated the screening." Darnell's eyes snapped to the envelope. "You did what?" he demanded. The word slipped out sharper than he intended. The lawyer didn't react. He opened the envelope calmly and removed a single sheet of paper. Then he placed it in the center of the table, turning it so Darnell could read it first. Darnell's eyes dropped to the page. The color drained from his face so quickly it looked unnatural. Celine inhaled sharply and grabbed the edge of her chair. The lawyer spoke again, his voice almost gentle. "Sedatives were detected in Cambria's system. Not prescribed, not accidental." The room fell completely silent, and for the first time since my son walked back into my house, his mask didn't just crack, it slipped. The silence after the lawyer slid that paper across the table wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that happens when a lie finally runs out of oxygen. Darnell stared at the toxicology report like he could force the ink to rearrange itself, like arguing hard enough might make laboratory results behave the way people sometimes do. Celine's hands trembled in her lap, but she didn't cry. Not real tears. Her eyes were too dry, her face too tight. She looked less like a woman caught doing something terrible and more like a woman calculating which version of the story might still save her. My lawyer didn't raise his voice. He didn't lecture. He didn't perform outrage the way Darnell had in my kitchen. He simply did what my husband had always trusted more than emotion. He followed procedure. "This finding triggers mandatory reporting," he said calmly, tapping the bylaw section with one finger. "And it triggers corporate protections." Darnell's head snapped up. "Mandatory reporting?" he repeated, but the tone had changed. It wasn't concern anymore. It was fear. "You're making this sound like a crime," Selena whispered. My lawyer looked at her once, expression flat. "It is. One word. No anger, no drama, just truth, landing like a gavel." Darnell shoved his chair back suddenly, the legs scraping hard against the floor. "This is insane," he snapped. "My mother is confused." "She's not." Cambria answered clearly. The lawyer interrupted. "And the toxicology results are clear." Darnell's eyes swung toward me, searching. He was looking for weakness, for hesitation, For the old version of me who believed motherhood meant forgiving everything. He didn't find her. "Ma," he said softly, switching masks again. "Talk to me. We can handle this privately." Privately. Like my life was a family embarrassment. Like his plan deserved the courtesy of silence. I met his eyes and felt something settle inside my chest. Not hatred. Distance. Clean distance. The kind you need when someone knows exactly where your heart lives. "No," I said quietly. Darnell swallowed. "You're really going to do this to me?" The words tried to turn the story inside out. "Make me the villain. Make him the victim." I didn't argue. "You did this," I said. "Not me." Selena leaned forward suddenly. "Cambria, please," she said quickly. When for the first time she used my name without sugar. "I didn't want to." "You did," I said calmly. "You didn't trip. You didn't slip. You measured." The lawyer began gathering documents with steady hands. Calls were made after that meeting, calls I didn't have to make myself. My husband had built the system years earlier so that the right people would move automatically when the wrong thing happened. And a formal report was filed based on the toxicology results and the recordings I provided. Investigators traced the man Selene had been meeting. Phone records, payment transfers, names became evidence. Selene tried to change her story once the world stopped treating this like family drama. She said she was confused. She said she felt pressured. She claimed Darnell told her I was unstable and needed supervision. But excuses collapse quickly when they meet documentation. And the dosage conversations, the videos, the timeline. The law doesn't care how sweet your voice sounds when you say mama. Darnell tried a different strategy. He contacted board members he thought were loyal. He framed me as emotional, grieving, paranoid. But my husband had designed the company carefully. No single person could take control simply by convincing others. And when the capacity challenge triggered the governance clause and toxicology confirmed sedation, the board had no choice. Not because they loved me, because they feared liability. Within days, Darnell was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His company access was suspended. His devices were collected. He walked out of the building he once believed he would inherit, his shoulders stiff, his jaw tight. Watching him leave didn't bring me satisfaction. It brought something quieter, sadness. Because when power disappears, you finally see what a person believed they deserved all along. Selene's consequences came slower. Investigations, interviews, cold offices where nobody smiled. She called me once, then twice. She left a voicemail trying to rehearse regret. I never called her back. Apologies don't undo plans. I stayed in my house, and I changed what mattered. Locks, security codes, account permissions. And I replaced the coffee machine. I threw away every mug Selene used, not out of anger, out of reclamation. I went back to my doctor and began repairing what had been done to my body. I sat in my living room again without pretending to sleep. One evening, the doorbell rang. Darnell stood outside. His eyes looked tired. His voice was quiet. "Ma," he said, "I made a mistake." I held his gaze for a long moment. "No," I said, "you made a plan." He flinched. And maybe that word hurt more than anything else. I closed the door gently, not dramatically, just a quiet click of the lock. And in that moment, I understood something people learn too late. Betrayal rarely comes from strangers. The deepest wounds always know your name.